were born this way under Old Covenant, there had to be this marking of the flesh. You couldn't choose to be.
Then he says, and I will give you the entire land of Canaan, not just for your lifetime, but your descendants.
Where people are not willing to commit, almost pre-rejecting commitment and the pain that might come with it. But I would argue that there's the pain of commitment and then there's the pain of... Hey, before we jump into the podcast, we want to thank all our donors and supporters who make the Today Count show possible. It's through your generosity that we're able to shape leaders through this content in this podcast. And be sure to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you find yourself coming across this content. All right, let's get to the podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Today Count show. We are in specifically the Genesis Project. And for those of you who are just now tuning in, we're the four of us, sometimes three of us, sometimes a couple of us, and I'll talk by myself if I have to, but we are talking through, discussing the book of Genesis from obviously a Christian perspective, but also a leadership perspective. Lots of good stuff that we can learn. And just to kind of catch you up, if you need caught up, is we've kind of been wrestling with Abraham here for a bit, and we're going to continue to. And what's just really interesting to me, and one of the questions that I had while we're looking through this, guys, is, it seems like every chapter, almost every other chapter, the last three chapters, God's talking about this covenant. How many times do we have to hear about this covenant? And before we read Genesis 17 and start talking about these things that we're learning from Scripture, I came up with a few things myself that maybe if I just kind of laid that down as a foundation to think about, as far as a leadership lesson, leadership expectations. The reason why I want to say that is because I think we are kind of sliding as a culture into leadership as a cool thing. Leadership is a brand. Leadership is who's number one on the charts, who's cool, who's not. And I think the whole idea of leadership is being lost in our culture. So just some things I wrote down, picking up from these verses. There is a call of leaders to walk blamelessly. Wow, there you go. So who wants to walk blamelessly? That sounds fun. We talk a lot in business and in nonprofit work about vision, but what we're going to read today, it seems as though vision comes first from God. Interesting concept. Does all vision need to come from God? If I have an idea, is that from God? I don't know. We'll talk about that. Another one that just hit me, particularly with this chapter, as we're going to read here in a minute, where God literally changes one man's name and one woman's name. It's pretty clear that identity transformation is something that God does through the leadership development process. And I know that's true for me. I wrote some embarrassing things in my last book, Story, about things I did when I was younger that I'm embarrassed about now, but I would be mortified if I had that weak a character, today. So God is always, working on us. I'm sure my character is not tight as a drum either. And then there's other things too. Think generationally, to be obedient even when it's hard. Trust God's timing. Intercede, for others. Those are some pretty good topics. And so I think that if you're joining us, hopefully that will cause you to lean in. Hey, welcome, guys.
Hey.
Everybody
Glad
good?
to be here.
Everybody good?
Yes.
It's been a minute since all four of us have been together. So let's have at it. I'll start. Right. Genesis chapter 17 says, when Abram was 99 years old, I just told my dad today that he's got to think about his next 15 years. He's 85. And he told me, dream on, son, dream on. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am El Shaddai, God Almighty. Serve me faithfully and live a blameless life. So there's the first deal that I think we need to wrestle with. I will make a covenant with you by which I will guarantee to give you countless descendants. We've already heard that before, right? Why is that being repeated again? Verse 3. At this, Abram fell down on the ground. Then God said to him, "This is my covenant with you. I will make you the father of a multitude of nations." We've heard that before. What's more, I am changing your name. Okay, there's a curveball. I will no longer be it will no longer be Abram. Instead, you will be called Abraham, for you will be the father of many nations. I will make you extremely fruitful. Your descendants will become many nations, and kings will be among them. I will confirm my covenant with you and your descendants after you. From generation to generation, this is the everlasting covenant. I will always be your God and the God of your descendants after you. And I will give you the entire land of Canaan, where you now live as a foreigner, to you and your descendants. It will be their possession forever, and I will be their God. Let's pause there at the end of verse 8, see what you guys have to say about that. Is a power-packed introduction.
A lot going on there.
There's a lot going on, and like I said, why is there so much repetition, of this covenant?
Well, as usual, I color outside the lines, and I look at this passage, and it just reminds me of a prayer meeting I had this morning with my partner, where we were trying to discern a direction that God is trying to lead us, and how we desire this kind of clarity. We don't get this kind of clarity that often, and the gift it is to have clarity, rock solid, this is it. And, once you don't have clarity, you start rehearsing, am I on the right path? And all this energy goes in a million different directions. And I just think, man, God founded his whole relationship with man on this promise, and it's rock solid.
Good. And Gary, we'd be really disappointed if you start coloring inside the lines. That would be disappointing. One of the things I thought about is, one of the business or leadership cliches, platitudes that we hear a lot, and we all know is true, is vision leaks. And is that one of the reasons why God continues? I don't know about you guys, but when I'm reading through Scripture and I haven't been in a certain book and on chapter for a while, and then I stumble upon it again, it's like I've never read it. I mean, it's and it just kind of wakens me up. So I wonder if that's part of why, though the covenant isn't repeated exactly the same, he keeps adding a little more and a little more. And maybe that's kind of what you're talking about, Gary, is that, we're seeking after clarity because we're insecure. We don't know. We can't see the future, but he does give us a little more. A little more. That's another thought I had anyway.
And could it be, as Moses is writing this, he is, this is in retrospect. So he's looking back, even maybe a lesson for us that God had spoken, and yet Abram kept finding a way to disregard it, to not believe it, to try a different path. Let's go. Even Sarah, hey, let's go, go try this with Hagar, and all of these things. And it could be Moses's way of reminding us that God spoke it, God declared it, it's going to happen, even in Abram's not disobedience to it necessarily, but just hey, I'm 99 years old. When it was first, I'm 86 years old, the first time around. And
maybe I misunderstood.
Maybe I'm just misunderstanding. And, could it be that the writer here is also just reminding us, no. It doesn't matter the time or the age or the circumstances. God spoke it, God declared it. And he's just reminding us, even for us, it's a sign of hope and a place of grace that, God declared it. And, God was going to see his will done. And he really, really, really wanted Abram to be the guy involved here. And he kept offering him a place to fulfill his purpose through Abram, just as much as in our life. Because how many times have we, tried to direct our own paths, if you would. And God said, no. There is a way that seems right to man, but the end thereof is death. But if you will, trust in God and submit to Him and follow, regardless of your age, regardless of your space, regardless of your income, regardless of having no kids. And, Abram, the title, Abram meaning the father of many. And Abram's like, well, that's not working out for me. And then we'll see in a moment, God changes his name to Abraham. And he said, well, since father of many is not working, let's try father of many nations. And let's see how that works out for you. But just again, could it be there's a little bit of the faithfulness of God to His promise, to His covenant, and to His people?
Yeah. Also, go ahead, Winston.
Well, I was just going to say to tag into that, like our pastor calls it revelation in retrospect. Like the covenant seems normal to us now that we're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
But like, how insane was this covenant? Like, how insane was this vision? This literally didn't exist. And so how hard must it have been for Abram to even wrap his mind around it, lean into it, embrace it? Like why are you trying to achieve this through us? Like, who are we that we could even do this? And physically, this literally doesn't make any kind of sense. So, I mean, kind of both. And Moses is really leaning into this revelation that God is trying to get to us, but also in real time in the text, how hard would it have been, for God to say it once, and Abraham's like, oh yeah, got that. Yeah, that makes total sense. Abraham's like, that. What are you talking about, God? That is literally crazy.
Yeah, I think it proves that we are addicted to the how, and when we can't figure out the how, then we forget about the what. And I mean, isn't that true? We go right to the how, and if the hows aren't working, then we just throw the whole thing away. Or we do what they did, as Matt suggested. They try making up their own how, and not being patient with the process. I mean, gosh, if we had to put my life in rewind, I wonder how many watts I lost because I focused so much on the how that I threw it away.
I'm restating a little bit of what's already been said, but there's a big element of grace here, in the sense that you've got this unilateral, God shows up. It doesn't say Abraham asked him, it says the Lord appeared. So he showed up. And then look at it. It says, I am, I will, and I will. And so what did Abraham do? Nothing. This is all God. And it's just like salvation. It's all Jesus. We're just drive-by benefits of God deciding to do something. And He just spoke this whole future of humanity into existence right here. It's just amazing.
Can we talk about the be blameless? That seems like a pretty large task there.
We want to skip that one and move forward.
Well, we'll let you do that one, Winston.
Yeah, because I mean, to what we're all saying, this is all God. This is all God. Uh-huh. Yet He tells Abram, be blameless.
I think
What's the Hebrew word? What's the Hebrew word used there? I'm curious now. I'm going to look this up. Y'all got me.
I was going to say, look it up in the definition or dictionary. It's literally don't be able to be blamed.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
I'm guessing it's kind of like beyond reproach, right?
It's not getting better.
I would think.
I feel like at least on the New Testament side, oftentimes when Jesus would point people to a reality that was impossible, He was trying to point them to Him. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is a same thread, if you will, right? Like, there's literally no way Abram could be blameless. He's already not blameless. He's done so much up until this point, once again trying to make it happen in his own power. So it's definitely like an impossible task that he's being assigned to, which would have to force him to then depend on God for this reality to exist, right?
Well, I'm sure, yeah, and I'm sure Abraham was a much greater man than myself. But it is kind of fun to, look over the chapters. I mean, if we can go to the beginning where because that's one thing we are seeing is that as each chapter continues, we're getting more details about what God's going to do, more specific. But let's just go back. Let's just remind ourselves, all that happened. Now the scriptures don't tell us, but we do know through extra biblical literature, even history, that it's not like Abram was a follower of Yahweh. He didn't know Yahweh. He worshiped foreign ideas until God, introduced himself. And then, he becomes a man of faith because he believes God, and so that's really good. He's a hero. And then, he leaves with his family, and that things are good, then they're not good. Then they go to Egypt, and that wasn't good. Yet somehow he comes out of Egypt with more money, and then he becomes a hero by being the bigger man and letting Lot go this way, and he went that way. And then Lot gets in trouble. He becomes the hero rescuing Lot. So he's a hero, and then he blows it again, where his wife and him, decide to have a kid through somebody else, and now he goes from a hero to a zero. He can take on armies, but he can't control his own house.
Wow.
Lots of stuff going on there. And now we pick up here where God is getting, so now he's down, to me, he's down in the zero category, right? That's where he's living. That's how he feels about himself. And then the Lord shows up again. Hey, I just want to remind you, it's going to be awesome.
It's interesting. It's the same. So I just quickly looked this up. It's the same Hebrew word that is used in Genesis 6 and 9 with Moses. It's Talmim, I believe is how you would say it in my Texas accent for the Hebrew. It is the verse for Noah was, now Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. And the definitions I'm pulling out of Strong's and different ones is that complete, that whole, that integrity. So it's walk before me faithfully and with integrity, which is what we saw Noah doing in earlier in the book of Genesis. So obviously, the writer is going here. There was a similarity, and could it be that God, in all of his sovereignty, allowed Abram to have an example before him with Noah, and hey, you wouldn't be the first in a wicked world to walk with some integrity here. So interesting. Exact same Hebrew word was used in both of those to indicate that. So kind of cool.
Yeah, what's cool that we're seeing is God is setting apart. He is sanctifying. Yeah. He's doing the work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
which would show, because of, if you just put it in context, how wicked the world was with Noah. Obviously, God destroyed it, but obviously that wickedness had returned. So there was a level of integrity to walk with that was countercultural, that was stark difference, that showed, if you walk this way. So the people of this covenant, maybe God is saying is, hey, you're going to walk with it, with integrity, with wholeness, with completeness, that others won't, that others are not, because they're, whether they've not chosen to be in or what, whatever. But I think that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. So before we go to verse 9, let's just take another quick look at now what is the totality of this covenant. So he says, I guarantee give you countless descendants. So that's one piece of it. And then he says he's adding now not just descendants, but nations. All right. So he's adding, nations, and he's now changing his name, showing a transformation of identity. And let's see. And then of course, we kind of forget that if it is nations, it's also kings. So, some of your kids are going to be kings. And then he goes on further, and he's just reminding, he kind of closes up the back end of the covenant, saying that I will always be your God. And then he adds this, and the God of your descendants after you. So that's an addition. Because before it was, as many stars in the sky, that's how many descendants you have. But it didn't really talk about what kind of descendants. And now he's saying, and I'm going to be their God too. And then he says, and I will give you the entire land of Canaan, not just for your lifetime, but your descendants, and it'll be their possession forever. So, boy, really covered it in a lot. All right, so let's go to verse 9, and we'll stop here pretty soon as we talk about Abram. It says, then God said to Abraham, your responsibility is to obey the terms of the covenant. Oh, okay. It was a unilateral covenant, but now he's bringing ownership into it. It says, you and all your descendants have this continual responsibility. Here it comes. This is the covenant that you and your descendants must keep. Each male among you must be circumcised. You must cut off the flesh of your foreskin as a sign of the covenant between me and you. From generation to generation, every male child must be circumcised on the 8th day after his birth. This applies not only to members of your family, but also to the servants born in your household. That's the employment benefit that they didn't know they were going to get. Born in your household, and the foreign-born servants whom you have purchased. All must be circumcised. Your bodies will bear the mark of my everlasting covenant, and any male who fails to be circumcised will be cut off from the covenant family for breaking the covenant. Pastor Matt, I know you want to talk about this.
Wow, this is so dramatic.
Before I hit record, you were talking about it, so I'm putting you on the spot.
Man, yeah, this is wild. Like Winston and I, we discussed this briefly because this is like what of all the things to cut on, like of all the areas that you could choose. But when you look at this, there was I'd read through, I don't know, one of the commentaries somewhere talking about this, but it was interesting because the parallel later would be spiritual circumcision. Once we get to the New Testament, we would see circumcision of the heart, the spirit, the soul. It would be a sign, if you would. But, this is in reference to you were born this way. And so under Old Covenant, this covenant, there had to be this marking of the flesh. Because you couldn't choose to be born circumcised. You didn't make that choice. You had nothing to do with that. So this had to be something that, he goes on after the 8th day and it begins to set up the rules around it. It's, then we see the similarity in the New Testament because your new birth, while you choose new birth, you don't choose the regeneration. Like you can't make that happen. Only what Christ has done can make that happen. So there's some parallels here that I find interesting, but there's a lot of conjecture around, why it was this, why it was, why it was circumcision. And then in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, he kind of just goes off on them in Galatians about circumcision and what they should do. The wild part to me with this covenant of circumcision is, yes, he set in after the 8th day a male was born to be circumcised. But man, if you were 30 and in the house and hadn't been circumcised, get in line, buddy. You next. And you look at the language around it. He said, my covenant in your flesh is be an everlasting covenant. Uncircumcised male is not, if he's not been circumcised, will be cut off from his people because he's broken the covenant. God was serious about it. This is, I think, in our Western American church, or modern church, not but modern. Let's come modern here. We like the idea of Jesus and the idea of salvation and the idea of being connected to it, but we don't always want the full circumcision of the heart that goes with it. And I think the spiritual parallel here is that God said, no, I'm committed to you. And when circumcision is a commitment. That is forever altering, and And the other thing is it's a cutting away of the flesh. Let's bring that to the New Testament. It's the same thing. What do we have to do? We have to die to the flesh, cut away the flesh. To the we're dying daily, as Paul said, to the desires of the flesh. And I mean, there's a lot of spiritual there, but man, this is you don't have to unpack this very far for it to get crazy. So, and there was the hygiene side of it, according to a lot of. According historically, I said we're going to say this. I'm not. I'll back off before I say that.
There have been seasons in my life where I've looked back and I thought, what was that even about? Did I grow in that season? Did I get better? Am I still stuck in that season? If you have similar thoughts, I want to introduce you to a book called Story, The Art of Learning from Your Past. This book, written by Jim Piper, shares principles and stories that actually help us get unstuck and step into the future we've always wanted. Be sure to stop by leadtodaycommunity.com to grab your copy today.
I'll jump in so you don't have to say that. But
Rescue.
One of the ways I took this part too was just the level of commitment required to experience the promise, to experience the vision. And I think just commitment in 2025 is lost, the value of commitment. And there's so many, whether it's in the workplace, whether we see it in relationships, where people are not willing to commit, almost pre-rejecting commitment and the pain that might come with it. But I mean, I would argue that there's the pain of commitment, and then there's the pain of not being committed, and valuing the pain of commitment, it being costly, but there's something on the other side of it, versus not committing and not being planted, not being just being the sojourner where you're constantly going from opportunity to opportunity or relationship to relationship, and that pain, that's a different pain than a pain of committing and enduring and investing and building, and so that's how I kind of interpret this, along with the realities of what Pastor Matt shared. Just that, man, commitment is costly, and so many don't want to pay the price.
I was listening to Ryan Hawk on the Learning Leader Show podcast, and he was interviewing the head wrestling coach. Now, anybody who knows me, even knows a little bit about me, knows it's difficult for me to even say the words Ohio State. But I have to tell you that the head wrestling coach for Ohio State was being interviewed by Ryan Hawk, and they got involved in a conversation that talked about pain and chosen pain, and the difference between those two things. They both can bring about good things, in time. We don't choose that. But and in his case, and I forget the coach's name, but very accomplished guy, well-respected guy, but he'd gone through some pretty significant setbacks in his life and difficulties and loss, in his life. And it was interesting, though, how he contrasted something happening to you versus you choosing kind of what you were saying, Winston. You're choosing a commitment, you're choosing a blameless life, and you're choosing sides to the point that there is pain that comes with that because of our flesh, because of the world in which we live. And he really had caught my attention as how he coined the phrases that he's trying to be a man who lives by choosing, the right kind of pain. It caught me pretty good here.
You mentioned earlier Abraham's name change and identity, and a child at 8 has not got anything to do with this decision. 8 months or 8 days.
8 days, yeah.
So this is tied to their identity. It's really interesting that he's told Abraham, "I'm creating something out of you," which is nations, and then he tells parents to mark their children, their male children, in this way. It's I don't know. It's just it couldn't be for the child at the moment. It had to be for the parents at that moment, and for the child later to know, I'm part of this. It's really.
Yeah, I remember when what I want to talk about here a little bit is infant baptism. I don't remember how old my son was, but he was just a little guy. He was so little that, most fundamental Christians, most conservative Christians would not have offered him communion, Lord's Supper at the church, probably would have not allowed him to be baptized. And we were in a church context. I don't remember how many people were there, but it wasn't that many. But it was kind of around the Last Supper kind of idea. We had a feast, and then that kind of turned into a time of communion. And somebody had given my son the juice and crackers. So I don't know if he was like 4 or 5, something like that. And I walked over there to gently take those away from my son, knowing that he couldn't possibly understand, what was going on. And with steely eyes, he grabbed my wrist and he stopped me, and he, basically challenged me for trying to take it away. And I asked him, I said, well, do you know what we're doing here? And man, he just gave me the gospel point by point, better than most adults. And I went, okay. And as we know, there's a thing called infant baptism, and most Protestants, don't fall in line with that. We don't practice that. Yet on the Protestant side, we do get these sometimes, 3-year-olds, and certainly 4-year-olds, and 5 and 6 for sure, year olds, where they want to be baptized. And many of us put on our Pharisaical robes and we go, well, they couldn't possibly understand, this. And we keep in, because to be frank, I think when I first went into ministry, I kind of struggled with that myself, had this deal. But then, what I'm doing is I'm piling on to what Gary said, is that, and Matt said it too, these 8-day-old children had nothing to do with this decision. Yet here is God's commandment for them, and obviously God's goal was that they'd be circumcised in the heart. But there is this thing of identity and community that maybe we just don't realize the power, of it. And so now I'm 25 and I kind of remember my baptism, but I don't. And so I want to be rebaptized. Okay, so what? Get rebaptized. But maybe we shouldn't forsake, the children, even if it's not super clear, but we might be surprised how clear it is in their heart, and their mind. I guess what I'm saying is, when it comes to ministry, when it comes to even exposing children to mission work, for example, I remember I took Jimmy to Mexico to build houses with me, and boy, there was a lot of chatter about that because he was really young. He wasn't 5, but he was like 8 or something like that. But I'll tell you, that was a shaping experience, for him. And obviously I was on guard, for him with where we were and what have you. But I just think it's interesting that God would give that commandment for 8 days, in that. So that stuck out to me. Kind of a sore area. Well, I just thought about, I wonder how much kind of disability insurance a lot of those guys had when, and was it a week? Was it 2 weeks? How long were they disability? All right. So we switch over to Sarai. In verse 15, it says, then God said to Abraham, regarding Sarai, your wife, her name will no longer be Sarai. From now on, her name will be Sarah, and I will bless her and give you a son from her. I will bless her and give you a son from her. Yes, I will bless her richly, and she will become the mother of many nations. Kings of nations will be among her descendants. Then Abraham, now I got to change my vocabulary. Just when I finally get it fixed that it's Abram, not Abraham, now I got to switch back to, now it's Abraham. Then Abraham bowed down to the ground, but he laughed to himself in disbelief. How could I become a father at the age of 100, he thought, and how can Sarah have a baby when she is 90 years old? So Abram said to God, may Ishmael live under your special blessing. I love that. God misspoke. Got to help him out a little bit. But God replied, no, no, Sarah, your wife, will give birth to a son for you. You will name him Isaac, and I will confirm my covenant with him. So now there's more details. And his descendants as an everlasting covenant. As for Ishmael, I will bless him also, just as you have asked. That's a good idea. While we're at it, I'm going to go ahead and bless him. I will make him extremely fruitful and multiply his descendants. He will become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant will be confirmed with Isaac, who will be born to you and Sarah. How many times has he said that now? About this time next year. More detail. Now he's laying it out. I mean, detail. When God had finished speaking, he left. I love that. I love that part. On that very day, Abraham took his son Ishmael. Let's pause for effect on that. And every male in his household, including those born there and those he had bought. Then he circumcised them, cutting off their foreskins, just as God had told him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised, and Ishmael, his son, was 13. Both Abraham, I just don't know how you can keep a straight face on that one. Both Abraham and his son Ishmael were circumcised on that same day, along with all the other men and boys of the household, whether they were born there or bought as servants, all were circumcised with him. I just got to say this real quick. I think it's amazing if we believe this is a redemption story here. I think it's amazing that how God's grace includes Ishmael. Doesn't forget about Ishmael. It wasn't Ishmael's fault. Right. What happened. And God blesses him. God makes sure he gets circumcised as well.
I think it's interesting here. This is obedience lived out to the fullest. I mean, obviously, and we can't cherry pick this out, because if you go back to chapter 15, chapter 16, Abraham at this point had decided, I tried it my way, and this isn't working. And yeah, like you said, he kind of offered up Ishmael again. Hey, how about this kid? He's 13 now. Let him be the chosen one. Obviously I'm inferring the statement I'm about to make, but Abraham didn't have to go pray about this obedience. He just did. God said, he did. Was it uncomfortable? Was it painful? Was it maybe even a little confusing? Yes, all the above. But man, how guilty are we when God is asking us to obey, that we want to go pray about that? No, there's some things you don't have to pray about. Some things you just obey. And we see this lived out right here. And Abram would go on to, make sure the entire house was following, because he knew the power of this covenant. But I don't know. When I thought about that, he heard, he obeyed. We do have the bits and pieces of the earlier story that he had tried to do it without obeying, and that wasn't working out for him. And so again, it's been said and laced through this whole conversation, the grace of God, allowing Abraham another opportunity, allowing Ishmael another opportunity, an opportunity. So.
You mentioned obedience, and I just think of what kind of a society or structure was there that. So Abraham goes and tells people, hey, line up, we're doing this. I mean, I'm just trying to think.
Oh, boys.
Who's going
field
first?
Trip.
And
field trip.
Tell me why this is again, and who's it worse for, the people being circumcised or the one doing it? I mean, it's just, the whole thing is as a leadership role. Holy moly. Yeah.
And there wasn't an instruction manual given either. So, what does it exactly look like? I mean,
Yeah,
and
learning as you go.
Who's gonna be the tester for
who's
the
first?
first five? Who's the first
Imitate.
5 testers? Oh, Doug, that didn't work too much.
Can you sharpen that rock a little bit? All right. Well, anyway.
Yeah, ladies, we apologize.
It was actually, apparently it was not it was practice among some peoples,
Right.
at the time. So because Winston and I had that conversation earlier, like how, like who, what, but apparently it was somewhat of wasn't completely foreign. I don't have any context around that. I kind of had Gary's questions, like who went first, So anyway,
was it Peter's sermon in Jerusalem where the response? I mean, where's that phrase? They were cut to the heart.
Acts 52.
Yeah, Did I get the context right? Was that after Peter's sermon?
Yeah, Acts chapter 2. Yeah, they were cut to the heart.
I think when you're looking for leaders, you are looking for those kind of people, right? People that are cut to the heart. They still have a conscience, and goodness and kindness and what's right moves them.
Let me ask something. On that cut to the heart, if you think about this sort of this commitment, this tangible. Okay, we're doing this because we obey God, and it costs something. And in the cut to the heart part, what is it today that you guys see as sort of the cost of obedience in salvation in the moment? I don't mean the long-term effect of obedience. I mean in the near term. So I'll give you an example. I've seen people not willing to come forward, even though they feel like God is calling them. There's the price of, I don't want to be embarrassed in front of people. I'm just asking, where is that? Is there an analogy to things that are involved that are hard for us in the salvation process? Humbling yourself is maybe one form of that. I don't know. The question is not very clear, I guess. I had a testimony from a guy that was in prison for murder, and he told the story that his life was a train wreck, and his mother invited him to go to a Wednesday night prayer meeting, and everybody there was just praying, and he said the Spirit of God, or he didn't know what it was at the time, but he said, I just felt like I had to go forward at an altar call, and he said, I just didn't want to. I had this big struggle with getting out of my seat and didn't want other people to see them. And he knew they'd been praying for him, so he didn't want to admit that he'd been wrong. Just all this stuff went through his mind, and he refused to do it. And 4 days later, he was involved in a murder. What I'm getting at is, what is it? Cutting something off is hard. You have to build up. I'm doing this out of obedience. There's a point at which you have to surrender to Christ. It has to be so important to you that nothing else matters. The shame, anything. And he couldn't do that. And he now says that God saved his life because by going into prison, he ended up getting saved in prison. And I don't know. I don't know. We're trying to make faith easy sometimes instead of there's a choice here. There's a decision to be made.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious conversation, really.
Well, when you step into a covenant should feel like it is costing something personally. There are great rewards typically to a covenant relationship, but there's great sacrifice, and there's great intentionality, and there's great willingness on the front end. And I think, some of this as we get into it, and I agree. I think there's there's a danger among, Western American church culture sometimes of I heard a guy, I read this years ago, 15, 20 years ago. Ed Stetzer, in his book, Missional Churches, probably, or Planting Missional Churches was probably the book he was at the time. He said the only stumbling block in your church should be the offense of the cross. Like when somebody walks in, and what he was getting at was making it easy for people to get there. But when they get there, the one thing they should stumble over is the cross. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, this is a big deal, and he was talking about, being welcoming in environments and, creating easy on ramps and all of that, which we should do. But he was clear to say, we're not going to make the cross pretty. We're not going to make salvation, I'm going to use the word easy here, but that's the wrong context of
smooth
it.
I mean,
over,
yeah.
We're not going to smooth it over. We are going to, you should have to run face first into the cross and come to a realization of, okay, I have to make a change. I have to be different. I have to make a decision that I'm going to step into this. And because covenant relationship doesn't mean that it's validated because I step into it. It's validated by the other side of it saying, I've willingly giving all on this side, and I'm asking you to willingly give all on your side. I think sometimes we try to step into salvation as we're validating salvation because I accepted it and said, okay, yeah, I want to do this. And we're looking at covenant relationship wrong. When I stepped into covenant relationship with my wife, I didn't validate it because I said, oh yeah, I agree. No, it was validated because we were both willing to give our life and everything to that marriage covenant. So the same is true in this. I think that kind of in line with what you're saying a little bit, Gary, is, when we come head first into the cross, face first into the cross, the reality of salvation and what Jesus did, it should cause us to pause, and it should cause us to react, and it should cause us to possibly hurt and to make change and to shift and to say, oh, this new covenant, when I give all because Christ gave all, now the covenant is validated. Mm-hmm. So
the next chapter continues the discussion of covenant. So I think that is a good place to leave it. Maybe we ponder the whole idea of covenant as we continue the discussion, because that is definitely what is being driven in here in these last X amount of chapters and going forth. And, just a interesting note to drop is towards the end of the next chapter, chapter 18, apparently this assertiveness by God is taking root in Abraham, to where he is now becoming an agent of change himself and becoming more like his creator. So that's a good place to stop. Guys, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you in Genesis 18.
Go Bucks.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us on the Today Counts show. We got so much more planned for you, so stay tuned and stay connected on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube. And remember, today counts.